this document is the section 10, the last section of the book of Yoga Sutra of first chapter. So I titled this, When One Succeeds in Meditation or Mindfulness, What Happens? What are the inner changes that takes place and what happens to the mind? And they are one of the most beautiful, I would say, how many? 12 sutras of the first chapter, the last 12 sutras. They highlight what happens, how these masters perceive the world outside. There is I did talk about three kinds of transformation, perhaps in section 4 or 5, Samadhi Parinam, the transformation by Samadhi, transformation by one pointedness, Ekagrata Parinam, and Niruddha Parinam, the transformation of the mind by emptiness. Those three sutras are in the third chapter, but they indicate. So, what happens? So, today's the first sutra is the number 40 sutra, Paramanu, Param Mahat Tattva, Antosya Vashikara. Such a beautiful. We'll go a little deeper into this easily. A person who succeeds in meditation. Now, I succeeded in meditation. Why? Because I feel calmness and peace. Everything is good. Good. They are just the beginning of a journey in meditation. But what he says, a person who succeeds in meditation attains mastery from the smallest atom to the entire universe. What it means? Can he control every one of them? The answer is totally different. Means that awakening, you become aware of the smallest atom to the infinite universe. Now you see that I perceive you as a person with a name and the form and the gender and the age and the profession and lot of other things. So all the information coming from outside. But now that master who has mastered the meditation, that perception changes completely. What happens? He finds out, he perceives deeper inside the body. That is one way we say that these people can read the thoughts, but they are very simple, ordinary thing to do. They are not ready to do it. Who is treading the path? So, what happens? There are only two things in the universe according to Eastern wisdom. What is matter and consciousness? So, what is matter? Body. Whatever is visible in this universe is matter, with the different names and the forms. Whatever is consciousness, it is individual consciousness. It is the real self, and it is the supreme consciousness. The matter is nothing but an extension. The matter is not self, and the material world is an extension and expansion of only one matter. That master of meditation realizes that he perceives the ultimate cause of that matter directly, all the time. Cause of matter, if we say, is atom. The cause of atom is mainly the three particles, and the cause of these particles is energy. So you see the reality of the matter. That is the meaning. So when we know the cause, we can know the effects of that cause. That is what happens. The main message here is that ignorance about not self is removed by the meditation, and the knowledge of the reality is revealed in the mind. It is the ignorance that causes the duality, division, conflicts. When removed, mind settles or merges with the true nature. It is the highest state of meditation. So, what exactly happens into the mind? I look at you, the mind goes through the sense organ, it recognizes a particular object that remains there. But deeper inside, your mind undergoes a change. You pick up the reality. You pick up that reality. So that is what happens. You see one common element, that is energy, whatever is visible in this material world. So, from a finest atom to the entire galaxy. First comes the reality, and then comes, yes, it is a galaxy, it is Casey, it is me, it is body, it is this. But first comes the reality. The mind now sticks to the reality. But those are secondary things, reading the thought. Now, what happens? What is the nature of the mind? Such a beautiful example, by metaphor, Patanjali explains and Vyasa comments. We have a crystal. Crystal is always pure. You put the crystal on a black surface. You don't see the crystal, you only see the black color. It is so much transparent. You put a crystal on a white surface. The whiteness shines through that crystal. Can the mind reaches to become a crystal, perfectly transparent, clear? So here the master gives you an example by the crystal, that mind, if it is a crystal, the mind loses its objectivity and also the subjectivity. It is the mind that divides as the knower and the known and the knowing. It is the mind which says, here I am. It is the mind that says, here you are. It is the same mind which knows what is going on between both of them. That you lose. There is a fusion. The way the crystal fuses with the surface and the color, the same way the mind is totally fused. What happens when the mind is fused? You constantly, all the time, at every second, you are one with the real self. That is known as awakening. That is what happens. So the word Patanjali uses for awakening is samapatti. Samapatti. Huh? This is enlightenment. But you see that is what example he gives through the mm, metaphor of a crystal. We always talk philosophically, the knower and the known and the knowing are fused together. So now see that. What happens, how it is fused? Objects are seen by the sense organs, but the objects are seen by the sense organs. Means senses are the seer and the knower, but objects cannot see the sense organ. First is, sense organs are seen by the mind, but the sense organ cannot see the mind. It means the mind is the seer now. Sense organs are the objects. Now the mind is seen by the real self. Mind cannot see the self. So what happens? There is one seer alone. That we realize that in which we live all the time. So, what happens? There is only one seer, and the mind is living in the purest form. So, that real self enjoys borrowing the consciousness to the mind, then to the sense organs, then it goes out, perceives the real world, at the same time it knows. There is only one non dual consciousness, is the state of awakening, is explained by our master in this. There is another way to understand that body is the result of tamoguna. Energy, the prana, is the result of rajoguna. Mind is the result of satoguna. What is the quality of a satoguna? Knowledge and happiness. Knowledge and the joy are the essential attributes of satoguna. So that he compared, the mind becomes a crystal that constantly reflects the essence and the joy. In that joy, the mind is not seeking anything from outside. Hence, the objectivity of the mind is lost. What happens to the subjectivity? Mind becomes the faithful servant and instrument of the real self. Until now, the mind was dictating itself as a master. So, what we are understanding in this section, that what happens once we achieve the so-called mindfulness or meditation state. So called, we succeed in mindfulness. What we consider succeeded in mindfulness, I feel relaxed today, but my mind was thinking a lot, my mind was reacting a lot. That is not the idea of a meditation or mindfulness. It is totally a work in different dimension of life. So going to the third sutra, means 42nd sutra. 42nd sutra explains savitarka samadhi. There are many different stages of meditation. Patanjali has used before. So we have understood almost 28 or 29 different stages of meditation. Then we reach to that stage. So he is explaining in 42nd and 43rd sutra, perhaps. He's just pointing. The detailed explanation is given in the third and the fourth chapter. That what happens, how it happens. But here he's pointing out that a higher meditator also experiences what? The savitarka samadhi, savitarka samapatti. So here the samapatti word is used for a stage in meditation. Mind gets the knowledge through a thinking process. Here is Casey, here is David, here is Alex. So there is a thought, there is an image, and behind the image there is a seed impression. So mind recognizes, yes, I know it. Now think. Just imagine you are into that state of meditation. So your journey of the mind starts from the seed, not from the thought. So you don't need a thought to recognize anything. See, thought, image, because of the memory and then the seed impression. We are not aware of the seed impression. I don't know how I recognize again and again how my mind recalls through the memory. So, what he is saying, he says that everything lies in the seed form. In deeper meditation, the moment anything comes in front, the mind goes to the seed, recognizes everything of that object, and you understand. So, that is not what the Savitarka meditation is. Meditation is that the mind goes to that level of the seed. So, then what happens? Do you need lot of thoughts for acquiring a knowledge? I heard that one master was walking with the Himalayas with his friend who has come to the Himalayas to stay with him. And they were walking in the mountains for about an hour. So after half an hour, his friend said, "Look at this beautiful mountain and the valley and the Ganges river are flowing." When the master returned to the monastery, he told his friend that you talk too much. Do I not know that this valley is beautiful? You have destroyed the beauty by expressing in thought. So we can make out how intense awareness he has, even while walking. That is the message the master is giving in this sutra. You see, such a beautiful way to point out. Patanjali is pointing out what happens when you succeed in meditation or mindfulness. Don't go by the false notion outside. Relaxation, calmness, peace, they are the byproduct. They are bound to be there with you. But your inner change, the brain changes, the state of your mind changes. That is what happens. Ah, we talk of a conscious rest and relaxation, no doubt, calmness, that is also okay. So in Shanti meditation, do you remember I take you to sensation, relaxation, and stillness outside, calmness and quietness inside, and that calmness and quietness meets the horizon deeper within. What is that horizon? Where the matter and the consciousness meets. The moment you realize that state, you succeed in meditation. Samapatte savitarka samadhi. So, still in the savitarka samadhi, the very object in the seed form remains. And in the next sutra, what he says, even that seed form disappears. So, when that seed impression disappears, the real knowledge alone shines. What is that real knowledge? Knowledge of the real self shines. Now, I can explain in a different way because your memory is also purified. Not only the thought pattern has completely gone, but the impressions from the unconscious level has also been purified. Just take an example, one example, simple. I see you means I see your physical body. Who perceives the physical body through the eyes? The physical mind. Because anytime the mind goes through the sense organ, perceives the world, it is the mind that is physical mind. Now become aware of the body. So the very awareness of the body is not seeing the body physically, but sensing, being aware, feeling. So that physical mind is little subtle. Then the Physical mind that perceives the object of the world. I'm just explaining. Go slowly. So, what happens? Whenever you see a particular object, the mind jumps and acquires the same ability to perceive an object. Now, if I say, look at the breath, are you looking at the breath? Are you aware of the breath? Yes. So, that mind is a subtle mind. Now, see, the quality of the mind is changing. Okay. Now, look at the thought, become aware of the thoughts. Thoughts are subtle, cannot be perceived. So, here the mind becomes subtler. Mind is one. Sorry. It is physical mind. When I see an object outside through the sense organ, it is the subtler mind that perceives the thoughts, which cannot be perceived by the sense organs. Are you getting it? So now, what is the next one? Go beyond the thought. What the mind has to see? Mind has to see nothing. Means what? It is the subtlest mind. So, what happens to the subtlest mind? It loses the objectivity. What is that objective states of the mind? There are five objective states of the mind: pramana, vipariya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. We learned in the second section. Five kinds of thought pattern: painful or non painful. They are gone. Mind loses the objectivity. So, what is left? Mind keeps the subjectivity, and in that subjectivity is full of satoguna, knowledge in the joy. But not only that, the real self then reflects alone through the mind, is considered as a higher meditative state. So you see that the mind always becomes subtle, it remains at the subtlest level all the time. What it means, it remains at the subtlest level. It doesn't care too much of, you are one object or the second object. It lives into the causal state. It reflects the cause. It does not reflect the effects. It is aware of it is aware of the effects, but it is aware of the cause. And the ultimate cause of the world is nothing but our true nature, our real self. So we enter into what? Nirvitarka Samadhi. That is our chapter. That is our sutra number 43. Smriti Parishuddhayo. So he says Smriti Parishuddhayo. Clearing of the memory. So clearing the memory does not mean that I forget you who you are. There is a memory of the consciousness which remains intact, that cannot be removed. So whenever it is required, it returns. The memory, when we talk of a short-term memory, long-term memory, and I have a loss of memory problem, it is we are talking of the mind. We are not talking of the consciousness. And if we have that loss, that memory is cleansed and purified, it means the objective state of the mind is gone. An objective state of the mind is gone, then what happens? Then you look at an object, it is clear, transparent. Until it is expressed in thought, even then the brain is clear. Total, it is transparent. It is a reflective mirror. Hey, hello, how are you? Yes, but it doesn't affect that state of the consciousness and the mind. Mind becomes so much pure. I'll not talk of the other stuff now. That will confuse. Now go to the 44. Ete savichara nirvichara cha sukshma vishaya vyakhyata. Now we understood there are 28, 29 different stages of meditation. So he's pointing out by regular practice of two stages of samadhi or meditation, the seeker enters into savichara and nirvichara samadhi as explained. Savichara with the thought, nirvichara without the thought. Sri Aurobindo used to say that it is wonderful to think. And then he says, it is remarkable not to think. So I remember while living with in that monastery in South India, so I always remember that phrase. It is remarkable not to think. And then he says, you cannot realize what can be achieved in the silence of the mind, the thoughtless state of the mind, that can never be achieved by the mind with the thought pattern. So he's pointing out even the higher state of meditation. So savichara means with thoughts. Here it is very subtle thought. Nirvichara means thoughtless, are the two stages of samadhi are attained. You experience that state. You don't know what to speak, but you speak. Vivekananda, when he came to United States in 1893, his feet were trembling when he was asked to speak. The mind came in the front. And the mind, I was asking, full of doubt and the fear and the anxiety, what should I do? How should I, what to speak? And then he recalled his master. Mentally, he offered himself entirely to the master and said in the mind, let the master speak. He went into this podium and he gave one of the most famous lecture in Chicago in the world of Parliament of Religions. More than 2,000 people stood up and they started clapping even when he spoke, my dear brothers and sisters. Because in America, we are not accustomed to addressing anyone as my brothers and sisters. But with that idea, so you can just understand that state of the mind. The mind lived into the nirvichara state, the thoughtless, and still he spoke. He gave one of the most beautiful lectures ever given by any master. You can find out on the Google. 1892. So the nirvichara, that state of the mind is reached by the for you guys, you may have that lecture or you can find out. Now what happens after savichara and nirvichara? He's simply pointing out. He's not explaining in detail. He is not explaining how to achieve that state. He says what happens when you succeed in mindfulness. And the mindfulness goes through the different stages. So initially he explains savitarka, nirvitarka, then he is explained savichara, nirvichara. Now he is saying sabija, nirbija. Bija means seed. Sabija means with seed, with past impressions that we are not aware of. We only know its impact when it effect enters into the mind. Nirbija means no seed. So it means we need to remove all the seed impressions from the mind. Then only we can bring an end to the suffering. That is what he explains in the 45 Sutra, an object can be subtle to the point of alinga. Means alinga means you don't realize there is impressions, but still there are impressions. So when you go into that state of deeper meditation, you realize, oh, there are still the impressions. So there is, he enters into these two states, Sabija and the Nirmija. Going into the 47th Sutra, Nirvichar Vaisharadaya Adhyatma Prasada. When you reach to that state of meditation, there is a revelation. He uses it symbolically. There is a revelation of spiritual light. Means you get a glimpse of what exactly is the true nature, what exactly is the real nature. In that state, does your mind and intellect ask any question? No. The reasoning ends because there is a revelation now. You are aware of that presence, which is objectless. The mind is not running after anything. Mind is not putting up any object. So that state where there is a revelation, the spiritual light, that spiritual light is what? It is a self aware force. So, what is self aware force? The sun gives light to every object without any bias. In the light of a sun, we see the light and we see other objects also. So, it is self aware force. And the word is used in English as self effulgent. Adhyatma prasada means it is the self that knows the self. That is what I have been stressing. Eastern wisdom is an instrument of knowledge aims at self discovery. So now you are aware of that. It is the self that is knowing the self. Now it is the self through the mind, through the intellect, through the sense organs is perceiving this world outside. At present, we have a doubt. At present, the mind takes over. At present, the ego takes over. But in that state, it is objectless. That objectless state helps you to realize and experience that consciousness, which is truth and the right bearing. That is our Sutra 48. Pay attention. He is just pointing in this, and he will explain these sutras in the other chapters. So we are also learning by pointing. So what happens, what it means intellectually and mentally? Doubt, no doubt. Fear, no fear. Anxiety, no anxiety. Real reaction, no reaction. Because it is objectless state. That is enough. We can explain it. But then what happens? There is a revelation of the spiritual light. So it is the self-aware force of that is in the previous sutra. But now what happens in this sutra? He says,
okay,
Ritam
here's what I
Hara.
found online.
Stop Google. So it is Ritam Bhara. It is truth, consciousness everywhere. You experience that non duality. You realize. And it is right bearing. Right bearing means it is eternal, it is all pervading that you see. Whatever you see, wherever you see only one reality. Now, the Patanjali in the next sutra still points out and warns us in the 49th sutra. And that is self explanatory. Knowledge attained or revealed in this meditative stage. In this means the previous sutra is different from the knowledge attained by inference or testimony because it is the knowledge of the self by the self. What we have been doing until now, if we have reached to that state, this master says this is meditation. Patanjali says 28 stages of meditation. Other master says fourfold practices. So that was the knowledge attained intellectually by the world, by inference, by testimony. Now you become the testimony to yourself. I don't need anyone to, I need not to prove where I am. I need not to prove. I'm already there. So that I is not the ego, that I is the real self. That I is the real self. So he's pointing out, understand, means close your eyes, check yourself. Are you there? Do you need any support from outside? No, I don't need any support of anything outside to know that non-dual, pure consciousness in the real self, because this real self knows by the real self. He's pointing out ultimate of what happens, different experiences happens in meditation. 50 at the impression produced superimposes other impressions causing ignorance. So he is still pointing out what will happen even when you realize you are into that state. You have to continue the journey. Why? Because you will realize that there are some very deep, minute, subtle seed impressions are left. So he is pointing out, please don't leave the journey. Continue the journey regularly. Nirvish Samadhi. So in the 51st Sutra, he says Nirvish Samadhi is attained once even these impressions have been removed and become calm, when everything has become tranquil and you live and work through that real self all the time. You have reached to that highest state. So these sutras, I think how many? Maybe 12 sutras are pointers. They are explained in other chapters. They are pointers that what happens when a seeker enters into the higher meditative